Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for keeping you waiting, but we're doing a member states briefing on the humanitarian situation and looking forward a bit on the recovery situation too with UNDP. Let me try and give you a quick overview of the situation as it is today. Overall, the relief operation is continuing to make progress. It gets better every day, but we're also still very conscious that there are large numbers of people who have not received what they need yet. And so we have, as we've been saying, a long way to go before we can feel satisfied about that. The logistic and other constraints remain considerable. Let me just go through some of the key areas on the health front. I think, as I've said before, I think the immediate phase of trauma operations is largely over, and there's a lot of capability on the ground to deal with the immediate effects of that. But we still have issues about making sure that those who've had operations and those who need intensive care for one reason or another have enough places to go. Clearly they don't have homes to go to in many cases, and that's something being addressed. We're also keeping a very close eye on the risks of diseases. There are some concerns about measles and concerns about tetanus in some places from all the obviously from injuries in very unsanitary conditions, but so far nothing alarming has been signalled or detected. Clearly also there will be a longer-term problem about how to cope with the large number of amputees in terms of artificial limbs and rehabilitation. But that's a slightly longer-term issue, but one we're very conscious of as well. On the waterfront, the situation is continuing to improve. There's no longer a reason for major concern about water. Water tankering and trucking is increased, and I think water is reaching those who need it. For the most part, I won't say the situation is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that is not our major concern at the moment. We still have major concerns about food, distribution of food. The World Food Programme has been working night and day on this. So far they have reached around 600,000 people, with around 16 million meals, meals equivalent if you like. But in the next few days this food effort will be scaling up very considerably, with the aim of reaching 2 million people by the end of the next 2-week period. This will be involve the distribution of some 10 million kilos of rice to over 400,000 households, which is the equivalent of about 2 million people. This is just in the greater Port-au-Prince area I'm talking about. I'll come back to other sites in a minute, through 16 main distribution sites. So that will be done through NGOs. Each site will be secured, and that operation will be scaling up in the next few days. It will be a combination of rice and other basic products, but also some ready-to-eat meals, particularly for those who don't have cooking facilities in the most destroyed areas, and of course supplies direct in many cases to orphanages and hospitals, around 400 altogether over the 14-day period. So that's something which is, as I say, is beginning to scale up and will be really reaching a much greater scale in the next few days, which is clearly needed. On the shelter front, again, this is a top priority for us. The focus is, I think as we've discussed before, not so much on creating large camps, but on helping people with shelter needs where they are. That is either in the informal settlements around Port-au-Prince and the other cities. I think there are around 500 of those in Port-au-Prince alone, making sure that people have either tents or, particularly in the first phase, other shelter materials, plastic sheeting, tarpaulins, wood, to create some temporary shelters, not only starting from scratch on plain ground or spare ground, if I can put it that way, but also many people are actually living by their houses, by their semi-destroyed houses, and they can use this kind of material in some ways more flexibly than a tent to create a shelter which is valuable and perhaps more spacious in some cases than a tent to live in. So that's the priority on the shelter front. There will be smaller camps around Port-au-Prince for some particular people, not large camps, as I say, 10 to 15,000 people, 5 in all are planned, and 3 more around some of the smaller cities. But the main focus is not on creating camps. This is a strategy agreed with the government to prevent the creation of large camps which could become permanent features, and to help people where they are, which is where they want to stay for the most part, as much as possible. In this context, sanitation is a particular concern at the moment. The need to provide effective sanitation to these, particularly to these informal camps around Port-au-Prince and elsewhere, and UNICEF and others in the water and sanitation cluster of giving that top priority to get sanitation to them as quickly as possible, but that will certainly take a few more days yet. The other priority remains protection, particularly protection of the most vulnerable, child protection. As you've heard, I think, from UNICEF in different ways, this is a huge concern at the moment with so many children involved, so many children who are orphaned, separated, or otherwise isolated, and the risks to them from unauthorized attempts to get them out of the country, as opposed to proper adoption procedures. So that's something which is of great concern at the moment. On the security side, the situation overall remains relatively calm. There are isolated incidents occasionally around distribution points, but the situation overall is reasonably good. Security is being provided for the distributions partly by, or largely by MINUSTA, the peacekeeping force, but also by the US and Canadian troops where we need some help in that area, and that will be increasingly the case, particularly for the large-scale food operation, larger-scale food operation, I should say, which will be starting in the next few days. On the logistics side, this remains a challenge. The airport is working well. The land route from Santo Domingo is working well. Other airports besides the one in Santo Domingo are also increasingly being used, but we had a setback in the last few days when it was revealed that the port needed more repairs than had first been thought, and that will take a while. So for the moment the port has fairly limited capacity to bring in goods, which is not helping us. Other issues like trucks and fuel are gradually being resolved, but they still do pose problems in some ways. On the coordination front, nothing much, I think, new to say. The cluster system is working effectively. We have very good systems in place now between the civilians and the military side, the humanitarians and the military forces, both the UN peacekeeping forces and the US and Canadian forces. We have a very well-organized joint operation tasking center set up in Port-au-Prince with everybody present, meeting daily to make sure that the tasks are agreed and coordinated as well as we can. On the resource mobilization front, again, I think that's going well. The flash appeal is now 82% funded. That was the $575 million we appealed for originally, which is a very good result, but of course we still want to get to 100%. Of course, the flash appeal is not the only source of funding and of the generous response. I think we have accounted for or listed around $2 billion worth of contributions or pledges altogether, both within and outside the flash appeal. So this has been and continues to be a very generous response from around the world. Within the flash appeal, there are still some sectors which are underfunded. The same ones we've discussed before, early recovery and the cash for work scheme, although we're making some progress there, agriculture, nutrition, emergency education, and to some extent water and sanitation as well. But that's partly because a lot of the money committed to the flash appeal has not yet been allocated, so that situation should improve, but we are putting particular focus on, as I say, on those underfunded areas. Looking forward a little bit, I won't go into the reconstruction side. We heard about that the other day. What we are looking to do is to make sure that we are putting in place contingency plans for the rainy and hurricane season. Everybody's very conscious that they're not next week, but they are in a few months' time, and therefore we need to be ready for that, not least from the shelter point of view, but also from contingency planning point of view. Where are people going to go? What warning can we get? Can we make sure we built back Haiti's own early warning systems and meteorological services to help with that? And finally, we want to make sure, as part of building Haiti back better, that we've got the right measures in place on the disaster risk reduction side and the disaster management side, so that future disasters can be less destructive and better managed locally as far as possible. Of course, an earthquake of this size will cause major havoc, whatever your preparations are, but the more building back better can involve earthquake-proof buildings and other disaster risk reduction measures, clearly the better it will be for the future.